Okay, we're going to get going. So my name is Andrew Klinick. I'm the group program manager for the Windows Phone app model. And I couldn't be more excited to be here. We've been working at this for 18 months. We haven't been able to tell you anything. It's really sucked for us because we don't like we're really bad at keeping secrets, and we actually want to get your feedback. And we couldn't be happier the fact that we're actually telling you about what we've been working on, but this is the start of us actually telling you more and more what we're going to be working on so we can get your feedback. I've been at Microsoft 20 years. I really want to get back to the way when we used to actually have conversations with you, and we didn't do shut up and ship. So hopefully we're moving on to that. My Twitter handle is Andrew Klinick. I'm trying to beat one of my co-workers in terms of following, so please follow me before you go to his session later on this week. So what's the goals for App Model? So we want to enable great apps. That's the number one thing we're here to do. The App Model team is there to make your apps run. How you get them installed, how they run, what they can do for multitasking. We want to make sure that you can do more and more great things, and we want to take as many of the inhibitors away from you so you can innovate on our platform. We wanted to converge with Windows. It doesn't make any sense to write an app for Windows is one way and phone is a different way. We wanted to make sure we took the best of both worlds, but we didn't want to lose the ability for running on a phone just by converging with Windows. And you'll see that as a theme going through. The way we've done it is radically different from what we've done in the past. 80% of the code that my team wrote was in the Windows code base. So Windows gains all the advantages that we bring along as well. Now the galactic reorg at Microsoft has happened, and we're all working together, and that's a great thing. But you'll really start to see this for the last 18 months is really working together and ensuring there's one way for you to write an app. And we wanted to make sure that you could take advantage of the new capabilities. I don't know about you, but that Nokia 630 is awesome. I happen to have one here. I was going to show you a demo on it. Apparently, my TV device, and this is not a TV by all accounts, so it won't work, but look, it's great. I love it. This is an amazing device. The 930 is awesome as well, and the 1520 is great. We want to make sure that you can scale and take advantage of all the new capabilities from the low-end devices all the way to the high-end devices. So what does that mean? So one Windows for app developers. So we want to make sure there was XAML tools. I'm not the XAML guy. But we wanted to make sure there's a shared API set and a shared app model. We didn't want you to have to think differently how you write your app for Windows and how you write your app for Windows Phone. Now, in reality, that means that some of the ways that you write an app for Windows is changing to be a little bit more phone-like. So we're trying to take the best of both worlds. Live tiles. It's the iconic. It is the number one user interface. When you talk to people about Windows Phone, they think about live tiles. We want to make sure there's one mechanism for doing that. An app distribution format. As much as Zap's been around for a while, we still love Zap, but there's a bunch of things we need to make it better. We're doing that, and we're working in the future with Windows, and we're doing that right now, delivering AppX. If you're familiar for Windows 8.1, it brings a whole bunch of things, and a bunch of app services as well. In terms of, we're mobile first, cloud first. We wanted to make sure there's a store registration, very important, nothing to do with me, but it's very, very important to be able to go do. We wanted to make sure that push notifications is probably the most important technology right now in the mobile space in terms of how do you communicate with your users. It's the only way that you can actually have a one-to-one relationship with your users. And that, in terms of usage, is hockey sticking. It's really going up. We wanted to make sure that there was just one way to do it at Microsoft and one way that actually scaled and worked effectively well. Any of you outside the US probably are aware that some of our notifications don't get through as quickly as they could. We spend a lot of time ensuring that. This is the token kind of architecture slide. It is not correct in terms of some boxes don't line up to everything. The key thing here is to think about the stuff in blue, and I'm colorblind, so it could be purple, I don't know, but is shared between us and Windows. There is just one mechanism to do it. There's no difference. The phone-only stuff, we have Silverlight. We know that we have 400,000 apps, hundreds of thousands of apps written in Silverlight today. We want to ensure that you can continue to use that, and we've done a load of work to ensure that everything you can do in Windows Phone 8.1, you can take advantage of in Silverlight. We don't want I think I tweeted earlier today, no dev left behind. We want to make sure that all your code, we don't want you to have to throw it all away just to go use the new features. And the store, we're getting there. There's still 2 separate stores, but there's a lot of commonality, and you can do some cool things in being able to have those shared apps between that. Well, I've got some build slides in my slides. These are new builds. So what about from an app model? Where do we really invest our time on this? Really thinking about from developer improvement, how do we work well on low-end devices? You know, this Nokia 630, it's great, but it has 512 megabytes of RAM. You know, Microsoft as a whole hasn't had to think about 512 megabytes of RAM for quite a few years. And running an app, and if you look at the apps that people want to run on these 512 megabyte devices, compared to maybe when you're running Windows 2000 with 512 megs, these apps on here do a whole bunch more than the apps used to run on Windows and Windows 2000. So ensuring that we work well on that and have this scalable experience is really, really important. So in terms of that, our competitors, they like to name it after a candy bar or something in terms of making sure that it runs well on 512 megabytes. But what does that mean? I mean, just the fact that an app can run is not good enough. We have to make sure the experience scales appropriately. We want you to be able to run well on 512 megabytes. So as a user, when they go buy a Windows Phone, your app is just going to go work. And we spend a lot of time providing a lot of guidance and actual system-level things there to ensure that your application will run and give you the guidance and help you at runtime. But we also want to make sure it ran well on greater than 512 megabytes. A lot of the feedback we got from Windows Phone 8, we did a pretty good job on 512. But you ended up being constrained if you're running on a 1520, which has 2 gigabytes. If I'm on a 2 gigabyte phone, then why the heck can't my app go ahead and use a gigabyte if it wants to? There's a ton of space available. How do we make it such that there's some headroom? So we had caps in Windows Phone 8. So 150 megabytes was, if you wanted to guarantee that your app ran everywhere, 150 megabytes was the key figure. If you went over 150 megabytes, you're going to have some problems. So we spent a lot of time helping you and educating you in terms of keeping it within 150 megs. And we had 300 megs on 1 gig and 450. But it worked well, but it was a little over-conservative. 80%, over 80% of our apps run in less than 80 megabytes. Well, in Windows Phone 8, we would go ahead and actually, we'd say, well, shoot, this app could be running 150 megs. So if there's an app already in memory, we're going to toss it out of memory and suspend it or tombstone it because we could use 150. Even if that app was only ever going to use 50, 60, 70 megabytes. So as a result, applications didn't resume as fast as we'd want them to because they were tombstoned. They might have even completely gone, so you had to create a new fresh instance. So on low-end devices, the experience suffered a little bit because apps pretty much always restarted. So in Windows Phone 8, we're introducing something which we're calling dynamic memory estimation. And basically what this is the system monitors how much your application is using over time. And it takes note of that. And it adjusts the memory cap based on how much your application is using. So if your application is only running at 30 megabytes, for example, the new calendar, which we built internally on top of our system, only runs in about 30 or 40 megabytes, then we'll only if other applications are still running, we'll only take 30 or 40 megabytes. So the result is more applications stay in memory, which means applications run faster because you're not creating a new instance every time. So even on a 512 megabyte app device, just by putting Windows Phone 8.1 on, your application experience will increase dramatically. You don't see that dreaded loading screen. Our job here is to make the loading screen go away as much as we possibly can. You don't have to do anything to your app. We do this all for you. And if you do a new version of your app that uses less memory or more memory, then we'll adjust based on that. And we keep track of this. And we're actually keeping track. We do some sampling of data, such we're actually tracking that in the cloud as well, to understand and see more and more in terms of what analytics and what kind of trends are going on, so we can adjust our dynamic memory estimation as we're going along. The result is more apps stay in memory. 512 megabytes is a transformative release in terms of the dynamic memory estimation. If you're a browser and if you use email, texting, and calendar a lot, then essentially they're always going to be in memory. You'll never see the loading screen. Now, if you go and launch the New York Times, well, that kind of uses a lot of memory. So then things will go away. and it will automatically make sure that your apps run a lot better. So your 512 megabyte device, my 630 feels more like a 920 did in Windows Phone 8. And on a 1 gig device, you essentially never see that loading screen because of the fact that we're doing a much better job of estimating the memory. So multitasking, it's an important thing. It is being able to build better solutions, being better mobile apps. Multitasking is the key thing on here. You talk about multitasking, there's two things you really have to think about it. Is the multitasking that we know as developers, and there's the multitasking that users think about. The users think about multitasking, all they think about is the task switcher. They don't know if the application is running most of the time, and they think that when you talk to a normal user, what does multitasking mean? Is how quickly can I switch between applications? So in Windows Phone 8, we introduced this ability to do Fast App Resume, where you opted in for your applications. In 8.1 applications, so existing 8.0 applications maintain that for compatibility perspective. We don't want to change the way your application runs, and you may have reliances of that, or you might have a bug in your resume code. We want to make sure that applications continue running. All 8.1 applications will always resume. And even more importantly is 8.1 applications don't close on back. Now, it turns out this is one of our one of the features that almost nobody understands, is if you hit the back button enough, if you exit the back stack of your app, then we'll actually cause your app to close. Now, those of you in the room probably know that because you've been doing Windows Phone development. Outside of this room, in the real world, nobody knows how to do that. If you ask a real user how to close an app, they're like, I don't know, I reboot the phone, launch a big website. So, we've introduced we've improved the task switcher. Now you saw this in update 3, but now because we want to be more convergent, you can now swipe down, and you can also close an application from the task switcher in Windows Phone 8.1. So it makes it easier for people to understand what's going on, and being able to take control of your applications is one of the things we really want to empower users to understand what they're doing. And the survey says that 100% of users you ask how to close an app, they ask for a big X button. So we gave them a big X button. But the folks who are coming from Windows 8.1, they want to swipe down too, we can do that as well. Now there's a session in terms of how you think about navigation of your application when it's always resuming. It's coming up tomorrow at 4 p.m. Robert from my team is going to be going over that. And looking at the best practices and how you can actually take advantage of that. Right now, I'd say the Twitter app is probably the best app in terms of understanding how to do how a UI that matches well with always resuming. So if you wanted to take a look at an app that I would suggest that has done it right, I'd say the Twitter app. Now, clearly, there's other apps that do it well as well. Twitter app is the one I use a lot. So that's from an end user's perspective of what multitasking is. But really, we want to make sure that you can have your code running, really do multitasking better. So we're introducing trigger-based execution in Windows Phone 8.1. And this allows your app to subscribe to triggers for things it's interested in. And the key thing here is your code only runs when it needs to. Is that, for example, if I wanted to know when I was going out for a run, or I was using my Bluetooth heart rate monitor, I don't want to happen to have that app running all the time on the off chance that I might be off on a run. It's going to, as you can tell, it's probably not that often. So, in terms of it's going to eat up batteries, it's going to eat up memory, it's going to impact the device. Now, so by doing triggers, we can make sure your application runs when it needs to. So some examples of this: push notification, geofencing, a Bluetooth low energy device. On schedule, the schedule is really interesting. It's like we have background agents today that run every 30 minutes. If that fits your schedule, then great. But with scheduled background tasks, you can now actually run at the rate that actually makes sense for you. And then finally, sensors. Now, you saw today that Nokia announced that this thing, and I will get the name wrong, their sensor core, which is super low power. So if I want to write a pedometer type application, then I can now have a sensor task that runs for as long as I want it to. So when I start the application, I can say, okay, well, look, I want to set off a background task that's going to listen to that sensor and do all the pedometer calculations for me. It will keep running in the background until you decide it doesn't need to. Now, eventually, if we run into memory pressure, we will pull that out of memory. But most of the time, it's always going to keep running. And the great thing about this, again, is like it runs when you start the sensor. So when you start going on a run. So if you're writing a run tracker type app, when you say, OK, I've started the run, you launch your sensor, and off it goes, and it keeps going until you want it to stop. Push to wake a task. So a push notification that causes a trigger that runs my task. I think this is probably our most powerful multitasking feature we've added in Windows Phone 8.1. So I create a push channel, as I do today, and then I create a trigger with that channel in the constructor. And whenever a push notification comes in, your app task runs. So if you look at the background agents that you guys are writing today, something like 90% of them are doing live tile updates. Well, live tile updates, it's great if my life happened to be on a 30-minute schedule. If I'm following baseball, which I don't, but baseball's a very important game, in terms of getting scores, or I'm following Premier League soccer, which I do, is that I want to get those updates. I want my tiles updating all the time. And like a half an hour schedule, well, that's kind of twice in a soccer game. That's not really what I wanted. So this way, now I can send a push notification and have that task run right there and generate the tile. It can update the Action Center. The Action Center has a complete API, so you can actually read and write to it without even having to put a toast. Now, you can put a toast, and that's cool. We recommend you do that often. But your app can run without ever even showing the toast. Another thing that's really interesting to think about here is thinking again about the user perception of performance. Right now, up until Phone 8, when you send a push notification, the toast comes up, user taps on that toast, then we launch your application. Now, if we're lucky, we resume your application. But even so, the perceived time for when you tap that toast to your application being interactive can be a couple of seconds. Now, that sucks from a user experience. But from being able to use push, now I can send a push that my task will run. I can do whatever I need to go do, and then you can do the toast. The beauty of this is when you tap the toast, you've done all the database writes, everything you wanted to go do that took that 1 or 2 seconds. The user just never saw it. So when they tap on that toast, your application is going to load a lot faster. And the user perception is your application is going to be running a lot quicker. They'll love Windows Phone. They'll love your app. They'll start using it more. You get 5 stars. We'll be millionaires by this time next week. So the key thing here is that it's allowing you to use your code to provide the right experience for your users. And ensuring that was one of our primary things we wanted to achieve by thinking about multitasking. So when we think about kind of event-driven programming, one of the biggest ones is geofencing. It's something we've been able to track location in the past. I could, Nokia Drive. I could do things running in the background. But again, that's fine if I want to go on a trip. Nokia Drive is telling me to go there. But if I wanted to know, when I arrived home, I wanted to go set my thermostat or something. I don't want to have to be running that app running the whole time during the day, knowing full well I'm not going to get home till 6 o'clock. So with geofencing, I can now create a geofence in my home, and when I go into that geofence or leave that geofence, a trigger will be fired, and your code can run. You can have up to 1,000 geofences. And the key thing here is pretty easy. And I'll show you a demo in a moment, in terms of being able to set up a geofence, and then that's all you have to do. Just set it up, just register your code, and then the system deals with all the low-power location mechanisms, and it tracks the geofence for you and just runs your code when it needs to. There's a session at 2 p.m. Where Christina from our location team is going to be going over this in much more detail. I recommend you go to that. I'm a big fan of geofences. You're also seeing this. Cortana is already using this. Cortana already works out. It's like, well, shoot, you seem to be spending from 8 till 6 maybe that's work, and I'll set up a geofence for work. So one of the things we really tried to do in Windows Phone 8.1 is build our experiences on the same platform that you're going to go build your stuff on. So it's something which we frankly have done a terrible job of in the past. And this time around, you see the calendar, the podcast app are written using our XAML framework and our app model, but also Cortana is taking advantage of all this geofencing. And the great thing about this is that clearly Cortana, we don't want that to burn your batteries. So there's been an awful lot of performance and battery enhancement on here to make sure that Cortana's great. The side effect is your application is also great to ensure that. So it's a virtuous cycle in terms of us making our platform better, which makes our apps better, but also makes your apps better. So enough already, where's the demo? Okay, so first of all, the demo gods were not with me. That was my slide deck, apparently. So hopefully I can remember my password. Okay, so the first demo, really, I'm going to take some credit for a completely different team at Microsoft. Is that, you've seen us, and there's the whole world now knows my password for my phone. Luckily, this is not my day-to-day phone. We've shown you this, the ability for a Microsoft employee to plug in the USB cable and do great demos. And then if you wanted the demo to your customers, then you had to go get an overhead projector, and you'd secretly be just cursing at us, like, why the heck can't I get this? Well, in Windows Phone 8.1, this is built into Windows Phone 8.1. So you all get to do this directly from your PC. Now, what's better than that is that if you have a newer device, a 630 or a 1520, and you're not trying to project to crazy screens like I'm doing, then we've also enabled Miracast. So this is a Miracast adapter. So I can now just go from within settings, and I can just automatically mirror my screen from my phone to Miracast wirelessly, which is huge. It is less impressive when I tell you as opposed to show you, but imagine. Look, it's mirroring exactly. Look, it's black over there and it's black here, so it's yes. But this thing costs like $50. We use it. I have an ancient HP TV in my office, and we use this to project from Windows supports Miracast, so we present from for our laptops, also from our phones. So we've gone wireless in my office, if nowhere else at Microsoft. So then I was trying to come up with some demos about multitasking, and I was like, well, shoot, geofencing. How on earth am I going to do that when I'm not moving? So I have a geofence app, and here you can see. So I'm going to add delete. So I have a bunch of geofences. So this is the geofence for Studio E, which is across the street from where we are. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one for here. So I can add a geofence. So this is just a really simple app using the Bing Map Control. And, well, OK, so it hasn't got a lock. We're in San Francisco somewhere. And, that's good enough for me. San Francisco, let's just do that. And we'll make it, 2,100 meters. How bad could it be, right? And we'll do it right here. We'll do it, Haywood seems like a nice place. And I can do this. Now, what I was hoping it would do, which it was doing prior to this, is location. It would actually track. It's not going to do it now because it hates me. Is that, imagine, if you will, those geofences are actually going to fire. And maybe the demo gods are clearly not with me on that. But being able to do that. Now, given that doesn't work, I thought Joe Belfiore, he took the easy approach today. Is that somebody's following me now? That's good. See, more of you need to do that as I'm doing this. So, in terms of, he was trying to do speech, and speech can sometimes go wrong, but quite often it works. How could I, one-up Joe and try something riskier than speech? And I thought, well, a Bluetooth heart rate monitor. How bad could that be? That's going to work first time, I'm sure. So. So I'm wearing a heart rate monitor, and honestly, I am wearing a heart rate monitor. Right now, I'm kind of wishing I wasn't. Thank you for the great presentation, even though it doesn't work. Hold on one more time. Come on. Refresh. Read device info. Is it doing something? Oh. I'll just get a defibrillator and sort myself out. So, oh, no, the battery levels go. Oh, there you go. See, then it is typically considerably less than that. So, I will take a deep breath. And it's going down? No, it's not going to go down. All right. So the beauty of this is that, you don't have to understand how a heart rate monitor works. We provide you with all the mechanism to do that. Sean Henry is going to be doing a presentation of actually how to write this app and how you can take advantage of that and get it to work better than it does when I'm doing it. Come on. Is it going to work now? As you can tell, this is clearly an app we should ship, because look at all the user messages. All right. So, back to slides that, and see, this is this device that works until you connect to it. So, so I'm going to go back to this. Okay. So I know slides work. My Bluetooth heart rate monitor will not interfere with this. I did actually have a macro. So for my sins, I used to work on VBA in Office. I had a macro that would tweet as I was going through each slide. I think I chose beer over finishing that last night. So we're great. So now we have this rich infrastructure for you to be able to multitask your tasks and being able to push to your device. But we really need to invest in push notifications. It's a huge growth area, and it's something which we really care deeply about. If we look at the volume of push notifications, it's just going through the roof. It's billion. There's the obvious WhatsApps of this world, but you look at ESPN or CNN or the BBC in terms of sending push notifications, and people are starting to rely on it in terms of how they use their phone. If it doesn't work well, then they're not going to love the phone. So we wanted to ensure there was one Microsoft push service. The Windows Notification Service, WNS, is something which frankly came from a lot of the stuff we did with Messenger in terms of being able to scale globally to gazillions of users, and then introduced in Windows 8. And we've really, I would say, they've taken it to the next level in this release in Windows Phone 8.1. So it's the same push notification service that works with Windows and Windows Phone. So if you want to communicate with your customers on a Microsoft platform, you just have to write to one API. But we also want to make sure, again, making sure no devs are left behind, that your existing push notifications that you've invested time in, they continue to work. And we wanted to go one step further than that. We wanted to make them more reliable without you having to do anything. So one of the great things about WNS, it provides you a much more reliable channel and scale in terms of it's using the power of Azure and really making sure that it's a global scale. So your existing push notifications will run over this WNS channel. We have one listener on device, because we didn't want to have two listeners on device. We didn't want to burn the battery, just because the user was using an app that uses MPNS as opposed to WNS. So we have one listener that listens to both those types, but it always gets delivered by the WNS channel. So the result is all push notifications, old and new, work much better and much more battery efficient. Now, to give you an idea of some of the testing that we've done for this, there's a PM on my team, and for the last month, I think his wife thinks he's nuts, because he's been following buses around Redmond. Microsoft has these connector buses, and they have Wi-Fi on the buses, and the connector, they take us to work. It's a great kind of free shuttle service. But they have a really, really bad Wi-Fi service on there. So he's been following this bus to see how we would transfer between Wi-Fi and cell to ensure we get the best thing. And he's been to India. We have people all around the world testing out and really going to the nth degree to make sure that reliability was our #1 concern and making sure that we did the right thing for you. And to give you an idea of the reliability, we try and use Wi-Fi as much as we possibly can because it's cheaper for a user. But the challenge with Wi-Fi is that you're switching between Wi-Fi networks, and like the handover for that is frankly pretty lousy. Now, turns out the cell is really, really good at that. So what we did after folks on my team following buses, working out this didn't work out too well, is we took the decision and said, okay, we're actually going to go with cell first because we can ensure a much, much more reliable mechanism for that. So that you will get your push notifications. Now, the good news is the amount of data that you're using is really, really, really small. Even if you're a massive push notification user, then it's still really, really small. But it guarantees that your message is going to get there at a lot higher rate than over Wi-Fi. Now, of course, if you turn off cell, then we'll use Wi-Fi as well. But it's making sure that we're really looking at what is the right decision from the user and making the right, and frankly, a change from the way that Windows did it, to make sure that, because push notifications are so important to make sure that we get that right. There's a session this afternoon at 5:30 with Thomas, who's around somewhere, he's over there, apparently, he just hurt himself by all accounts, in terms of ensuring, and he goes into much more detail on this, and how you can build your clients. And in a first, I think, for Windows Phone development, there's actually a multitasking session going on at the same time, and I believe they're going to be pushing between each other to show how great this works. So push notifications is a big part of what we've been trying to do. But when you get a push, you want to be able to do toast notifications. We want to make sure that I didn't have to think about how I was going to do it on Windows. I didn't want to have to, if we converge the service and there was a different data format between Windows and phone, then we wouldn't have got any of the advantages. So there's a common data format for toast notifications, but there's a device-specific visualization for that. So if you see on Windows, I have more space. If I'm on a large tablet, then I want to be able to show more. And on the phone, so here you see the same toast payload just being displayed, but with the device-specific visualization. Now, that being said, push notifications are great, but you're getting so many of them. The Action Center really is here to help to make that an integral part of what you do on the phone. Now, clearly, I'm somewhat biased in that my team has helped build the Action Center, but it's a transformative user experience in terms of how you use your phone and how users will actually use your applications. If you're sending push notifications right now, they might have pinned your tile to the home screen, but then again, they might not have, and they've probably missed a lot of your notifications. So they're probably not coming into your application as much as they possibly could be. By using the Action Center, you're getting prime real estate, essentially right into the user's front door to understand and show the value that your application is providing through notifications. Now, we could have taken the simple approach here and just say, well, we'll take all the existing push notifications and stick them in there, and we group it by application, and we do that. So without doing any work, if your application sends push notifications, it shows up in the Action Center. But we provide you with a full API so that you can update and remove notifications to provide the user experience inside of the Action Center that makes sense for you. You might decide if you're getting thousands of notifications, you might actually want to roll those up and provide a slightly better experience in terms of being able to do that, rather than us just listing those out. So the idea is to give you the flexibility and frankly, go see what you go build with it. And it's something which we're actually really intrigued to see the experiences that you're going to go build on the Action Center. And it's one of the kind of signature adds to the Windows Phone experience. So notifications are cool, but live tiles clearly are also cool. Now, I stole this from Matt Hiddinger, who sat right here. I stole this from his slide. It's ugly, so I'm blaming him for why it's ugly. In terms of the key thing here is that we want to have the same template mechanism between Windows Phone and Windows. Now, the result is that you get a gazillion different templates. Matt will correct me. I think it's 42, right? It's a lot. It's a lot. But the idea here is to give you more flexibility to get your users more engaged. So you've got a lot more flexibility in templates. And of course, you can still go generate a ping and have complete control over your tile. But this gives you a more data-efficient way to do some common scenarios. If you're just going to update the score and you didn't care that it was in a specific pixel point, then you can just use that data to come down, and we'll display it in a template. Matt's going to be talking about this at 2:30 tomorrow, and going into a lot more detail in terms of how you should think about using live tiles for your applications and how you can take advantage of of using both and building universal apps to deal with that. So this is great. You know, there's a lot of cool new stuff that you can do with your application. But how about actually getting your application onto device? If a user doesn't download it from the store and install it, it doesn't matter how great your code is. We want to make sure that we provide you with a much better, more efficient way to get your application onto the device. So in Windows Phone 8.1, we're introducing AppX. AppX is the format that came from Windows. And it's the same format now for a Windows Phone and a Windows application. So the Universal App project that you saw earlier today in the keynote, it generates an AppX for a phone, generates an AppX for Windows. The key thing here is that it's exactly the same format. So you don't have to learn the particular tricks of how a phone does it, and particular tricks of how Windows does it. It's the same format. And there's a lot of advantages, frankly, that AppX brings along. When we were starting Windows Phone 8.1, it was like, okay, so what are the big things we have to go do with fixing our distribution format? And let's forget about convergence. Just thinking about what are the problems that you're seeing today. So one of the big problems is as we have more and more kind of device diversity, in terms of I have larger screens, I go from a 630 to a 1520, so I have multiple resolutions, and I also have multiple languages that I want to be able to support. Now, we enabled you to do this in Zap so that you could pull this out, but if I'm English, my French is poor, so I don't download French that much. But if you localized your game and into 6 languages and you did the 3 different resolutions, then I'd download all of those assets onto my phone and would never use them. So what you can do now is you can create essentially the largest AppX in the world that has all the different resolutions and all the different languages, upload that up to the store, and the store is smart enough such that if I'm a French user on a 720p device, then it will download the app, but will only download the resolutions and the language packs for me. So you could have a 2 GB AppX up there, but as a user, I'd only download the bits that I needed to. And if I was French Canadian and I wanted to go and add English back into that, then if I switch over to English, then the marketplace will go and get the English resources and install them for you without you having to go do that within your application. So this makes it a lot easier for you to support a lot wider range of customers without you having to do a lot of the work. Now, frankly, translating and getting the screen resolutions is work, but you don't have to think about the infrastructure, how to deliver that. The other major advantage for this is a data-efficient download. So if you look at most of the applications that are up in the store today, the code in that Zap or in that AppX is actually relatively small. All the pings and all the graphics and all the text take up the vast majority of that. So for example, if you're an 800 megabyte game and you wanted to do a bug fix, you might only change maybe 10K of that. Right now on Windows Phone, to do that, you'd have to upload the 800 megabytes again. But more importantly, the user would have to download 800 megabytes to update your application. They're not going to want to do that often, even over Wi-Fi. So now with AppX, what you can do is you can update the DLL, and we'll only download the changes. So if you had an 800 megabyte AppX, then we'll only download that 10K worth of change for your code. So the result is we can keep apps more up to date. Data usage goes significantly down. And this is really important when if you're on a cell system where data is expensive. We're kind of lucky here in the US. It's still pretty expensive, but as a percentage of our income, it's relatively decent. If you're in Uganda, if you have to download another 50 or 60 megabytes that could actually have a significant impact on your daily lifestyle. So we wanted to make sure that we did that. Now, there's a session tomorrow with Barclay Hill from my team, who's going to go into a lot more detail about our new packaging format and all the benefits it provides you. There's one more thing we want to be able to do to help with low-end devices and really take advantage of the cheapness of SD cards. We made SD cards available on Windows Phone 8, and that was great. I could store media on that. I could actually put a Zap on that, and I could plug it in and install from that, which is kind of nice from a sneakernet perspective. But we didn't allow you to install applications onto SD. So in Windows Phone 8.1, we're allowing users can decide to install or move their application onto SD. And the great thing about this is that from a user perspective, if you look at the Nokia 520 is selling really well. I have no doubt the 630 is going to follow that in terms of sales. It only has 4 gigabytes on there. That quickly fills up. But buying a 16 gigabyte SD card is dirt cheap. They plug that in. So they could start by installing their application locally, and they start running out of space. They go buy an SD card, and they can choose to move their application. Now, what we wanted to do was to ensure that as many applications were available to users to move to the SD card so they could get the maximum benefit from that. So by default, your application will be opted in to SD. But if we were going to do that, we had to ensure that we were going to protect your IP as much as we protect your IP today on Windows Phone when it's installed on the device. So the app is encrypted on the SD card for both protection, so it's encrypted and it's encrypted using a key that's specific to that device. So even if I took my SD card out and gave it to a friend who hadn't paid for your application, they couldn't rip off that. Even if they put it in a PC, it's still encrypted and only work on the device that it was downloaded on. But it's also important for an encryption is being able to isolate applications. The vast majority of SD cards are not using NTFS. There is no security on there using exFAT. Well, if we were just to put your application straight onto the SD card, there would be nothing stopping applications being able to go and snoop and see what's happening in the other applications' isolated storage that are on the SD card. So even if you get access to the SD card, and our new File I/O APIs allow you to do that, you won't be able to read from another application's folder, because even if you manage to get the files, they're all encrypted using a different key than the key that you're encrypted on. So you still get the protection both from an IP and an isolation perspective, even though it's on SD card. If you do want to opt out, you can opt out with a flag in the manifest, which does mean you have to kind of resubmit your application. So somewhat by design, because we didn't want you to do that. We want you to be on SD cards as much as we possibly can. But we also recognize it's your IP and it's your decision as to what you want to be able to do with your application. So if you really feel strongly that your application shouldn't be on SD card for some security reasons, then you can go ahead and do that. Our advice and our desire is to keep your applications on SDs, because more and more users will use your applications. So we allow you to store your application and data on an SD card. But we're living in a cloud world. And SD is great, but it's kind of the floppy disk of yesterday, right? So as we're living in a more cloud-based device, how can we allow you to take advantage of that and do a lot of it for free and enable you to work better with Windows? So we're introducing in Windows Phone 8 application roaming and application backup. So application data roaming allows you to roam up to 100K of settings. So think of this as a way to roam your settings back into OneDrive between both Windows and your phone application. So here I have a Windows app with a PFN of 123. Clearly it's not the PFN of 123. And I have the phone version of the same app. So imagine this is a universal app. As long as I'm sharing the same PFN, the identifier in the store, then we'll roam that data between it. So if you store what level a user's on in a game in your settings, then and you get to level 23 on the Windows, when you get to your phone, it'll automatically say, well, I'm on level 23. You get to control whatever you want in 100K. The other advantage of this 100K does not come off the user's OneDrive quota. So even if I have 2,000 apps installed and they're all using 100K, it doesn't come off my I think we're 7 gigabytes for free now. So it provides you with a lot of flexibility. Frankly, if we look at something like 70% of our applications have less than 100K in their isolated storage today. So it turns out 100K you can actually do a fair amount. And even if you don't have a Windows app and a Windows Phone app, you can still roam this and use it as a way to do simple cloud backup of your settings. We're also doing backup for both the start screen and for your application. When you talk to users, what's the biggest regret when they lose their phone? Number one thing is, I lost my phone, I had to go buy another phone. The number two thing is always, it's like, well, I spent all that time making my start screen look beautiful, and now I have to go recreate it, and I can't remember what the heck I did. So we're automatically backing up the start screen for you, so if you lose a phone, or you reset it and you start a new one, or you get a new phone, you just log in with your Microsoft account, and we'll automatically pull down the start screen and restore that automatically for you. We're also going to do app data backup. So if you store your data in the local folder, then we'll back that up to OneDrive for you. So you get to control, you might not want to have some data that gets backed up to OneDrive. You can put that in your temporary folder and it won't get backed up. So you get to control exactly what gets backed up. But we'll back that up for you. And again, when you restore the device, we'll restore your app data down for you. The key difference here is it's not limited to 100K, but it does come off the user's OneDrive quota. So if your app backs up a gigabyte of data, then it's going to come off the user's OneDrive quota. Now, again, the user can decide whether they want to turn off app data backup as well, or go buy more OneDrive. The key thing here, it enables you to get a lot of the benefits of the cloud without really having to do much work. Sean McKenna on my team is going to be talking about this at 9 a.m. on Friday, which is the first session after the party, so I'm sure it's going to be massively attended, and everybody's going to be very excited to be there. But do go. It's a great session in terms of understanding what to do on this. So when we talk about deployment, most of the time, for most of us, is deploying an application from the store. But more and more people are going mobile first in the enterprise, and they want to be able to take advantage of Windows Phone in the enterprise. And we introduced enterprise deployment in Windows Phone 8, and we've optimized that a little bit in Windows Phone 8.1. So there's no need to download from the store. You can download it from wherever you want it to be. You sign the application with your enterprise token. You never have to send it to Microsoft. Now, we provide the toolkit inside of our store ingestion toolkit inside of Visual Studio. We highly recommend you run that on your internal applications, but you get to have complete control how you distribute it and who gets it. It costs $299 a year to enroll and get a certificate, and that essentially allows you then to go and sign your application. And you can distribute it by a number of different ways. Device management services, be that Intune, there's the Microsoft server, of which I don't know the name, but there's third parties as well. There's lots of mobile device management. We just made the announcement back last week at Satya's reveal of when we revealed Office for iPad as well. So we can do that, and frankly, we use that inside of Microsoft to distribute software. The other advantage of device management servers, they actually allow you to control what a user does on the device. You can distribute it from your website if you want to. You can distribute it via email, SD card, carrier pigeons. We don't care. As long as it gets onto the device, then and it's been signed with your app enterprise deployment certificate, and the user is enrolled with that certificate, then you can distribute your application. Tomorrow, John and Cliff from my team will be going over that at 1 p.m. in a lot more detail in terms of what you can do there. One of the final things I want to talk about is the ability to share data between applications. You know, one of the great things about the mobile kind of app ecosystem that's built up is that now we have this ability for applications to be isolated. Users don't have to worry about installing one app that's going to go kill another app. The downside to that, it's pretty difficult. Apps are islands right now. There's no way to communicate between applications. So in Windows Phone 8.1, we're introducing the ability to share data between applications. Those of you who are familiar with Windows 8.0 and 8.1, This is the share contract. So enabling the share contract on Windows Phone. But what we've done is we've really thought about how we would implement this. If we just blindly took the share contract from Windows, then it wouldn't have worked well on 512 megabyte phones. Because on Windows, you don't have to worry about memory. You've got lots of disk space. You can swap, and it works just fine. So you're sharing on Windows. You have the application that's sharing from and the application that's sharing to. They both stay in memory. And that's great. But if you're running on 512 megabytes, that guarantees it will never work. So if you have your application you want to share to Facebook, it's just not going to work unless your app magically happens to run on 2 or 3 megabytes. So we've gone back with the folks who helped that in Windows and redesigned the application lifecycle on that so that it scales up from a low-end device on 512 megabytes all the way through to Windows. So we have the ability, you start from your application, and we assume that your application is going to get unloaded when you launch the application you're sharing to. And we ensure that that data is consistent through that, so the user experience is great. Now, one of the things that I get asked initially is like, oh God, do we have the Charms bar in Windows Phone? And no, we don't have the Charms bar on Windows Phone. That's not an indictment of how good or bad the Charms bar is that we have a lot more real estate to be able to deal with that. So we have, and we also kind of talk to you guys in terms of, well, what did you want? Well, the reality is most of you wanted the button that said share. So when you hit share on your app bar, they could actually create this. So there is no system gesture on that. What there is system UI that shows you the list of applications that you can share to, and it also orders it by the applications you use the most. So you don't have, we were worried that applications would end up all being called aardvarks, so they'd be at the top of the list. So right now, if you use Twitter a lot, then Twitter will be at the top. And it takes advantage of that and does that over time. Arun from my team will be talking about that tomorrow at 1 p.m. and really understanding how that works, and also thinking about file choosers and pickers. We're also doing that, and the cache file updater, bringing that from Windows, but again, ensuring that it works on a low-end memory device. The beauty of this is you can now extend out your applications and make them available and be useful almost as a platform to other users. So you get this kind of nice intuitive cycle between the two. So your apps can get used more, their apps get used more, users love you because they can share where they want to be able to do it. So in summary, the app model, we really spent a lot of time here making sure that you have all the right foundations to go build some really great applications. Is that your apps will run better just by being on Windows Phone 8.1. You can really take advantage of the new multitasking in Windows Phone 8.1 to ensure your apps run even better than just by running on that. We wanted to make sure that deployment really, really works well for you, and it works well for the user so that we're cognizant of how much data people are using and how much information that they're pulling down. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that we took advantage of the cloud, both in being able to get you backup and roaming, but then also thinking about how you use WNS and Action Center so you can send push notifications. My kids are always telling me, Dad, you're using the phone too much. So hopefully, and this is kind of a shout out to them that they're listening now. My promise this year is I'll use the phone less because I'm going to get new apps from you guys in terms of sending me push notifications. So it's going to only interrupt me, when I need to, as opposed to me just kind of looking at my screen and ignoring them. So that's my promise publicly now that I will use my phone less. But we really want to make sure that we provide you a great platform so you can go build that. I encourage you to go all to the great sessions from my team. There's at least 15 from my team, I think, over the next couple of days. I'm going to be available for, theoretically, it's one-to-one expert management. I don't think it's going to be one-to-one by any stretch of the imagination, more one-to-many out here after this. And we have time for questions, but most importantly, we are actually having a competition in my team, is who gets the highest score. So far, and I want to make sure that my 100% record continues, so please scan this QR code. I would appreciate honesty is the best policy, but if you're feeling generous, then I would appreciate that too. And it wouldn't be professional of me to tell you to downplay Thomas Fennell, but I think that's a reasonable thing to say. And I'm open to questions, and thank you for coming. So there are microphones if you have questions. Shock and awe. You all want your Xbox or how to spend your $500, I understand. I see lots of people scanning the QR code, that's good. So. Yes?
In the data that's backed up to OneDrive, will users actually be able to see the data that your app, when your app backs up either its settings or other data, will users be able to
That's
see
a good
that
question.
data in
The
OneDrive?
question was, will the user be able to see the data that is on the OneDrive? Now, I'm hopeful. Sean McKenna, I don't know if Sean is here. Well, Sean is right back there. I will attempt to answer and get it wrong, and Sean will tell you exactly what it is. They can't see it currently. It is something we do want to, it's something we need to do a better job of, frankly. Yeah. Yes? Sorry, repeat the question.
In Windows 8, the drivers for stuff like compass, etc., were not all async await available tasks. Have you resolved that?
Yeah, so how asynchronous are we in Windows Phone 8.1? I think is the kind of, if I was trying to, yes, we're considerably more. I'm sure. Look, we're very aware that we want to make, we can't, synchronous is good for some things, and async is, and we're async where we need to be, and drivers is a big part of that. Yeah.
The user data you just mentioned on SkyDrive.
Yeah.
Is that something that you want to make visible and non-visible? Like high scores, you probably don't want the end user to change, but maybe contacts you would. Is that going to be selectable then?
Yeah. So if you use app data backup and app data roaming, then that won't show up. Now, of course, you can use the OneDrive SDK. And one of the good things, which I didn't bring in this in another session, is you can actually use the built-in MSA account to auth against without the user having to type it in again, which makes it a lot easier to authorize against that. And then you can use the standard OneDrive the REST SDK so that you can read-write to it as much as you would want to. So if you want to put data into OneDrive and you want a user to be able to see it, then I would recommend using the OneDrive SDK to do that. Think of it as app data backup and app data roaming, essentially as kind of a package way that you can get it almost for free without having to think about it. Yes?
What limitations, if any, are there of doing the development with the WinJS as opposed to the XAML? Is almost all of these features available fairly soon from the HTML5?
Right. So the question is what disadvantages are there of a WinJS versus this? In terms of everything you see here is WinRT. So there is nothing that stops it from working. I am not the person who would know in terms of exactly, does one scenario work? Like, for example, I believe that background audio doesn't work from WinJS, and it does from XAML and Silverlight. But I think that was more of we didn't have time to get it done, rather than, and the amount of background audio apps written in WinJS is pretty small. So.
Hi, if you have a universal app on your Windows Phone 8 and your Windows 8.1, when you send a push notification, do you send separately each device, or does the single push notification go to both devices?
I believe you can choose. I'm looking at Matt or Thomas. Where did Thomas? If I'm doing a push to a phone and 8, do I have to reference each one specifically, or can I send it once and it will go to both? Did that?
I'm sorry.
So the answer was you can have the same app identity, but you can have two different URIs to send to the push.
Is it only 8.1 apps that won't close with the back button, or is it
Right.
all apps?
Is if the not closing on back, does that apply just to 8.1 or does it apply to 8.0? And it's just to 8.1 because we wanted this to be a conscious decision on your part. is in terms of, we experimented, frankly, in not closing 8.0 apps, but enough just failed because they were assuming that they would get closed, and we want to make sure that apps work.
Okay.
I had a question for enterprise applications that
Yep.
we would like to bring your own device kind of applications that we would like to build on Windows. Now that I see the universal apps paradigm that you guys have been following, how do you see this being more secure than competitor platforms? How would you?
Well, enterprise distribution is not really a security mechanism. So how secure your application is, the question was how does our enterprise distribution and enterprise application platform compare security-wise to the competitors? So distribution is, security there really is up to you. You're the key holder. If you make that key available to the world, then there's no security. It's up to you. It's as secure as you want to keep that key
Okay.
for the distribution. Once the application is running, then you get all the security guarantees that you get today on Windows and Windows Phone.
Do you have any new features in Windows 8.1 for building BIOD devices, device DRM?
Those are
management
excellent
applications?
questions of which
Yeah.
I do not know the answer. Yes.
All right.
But there is an enterprise session. There's an enterprise session, both how to develop apps, but also how to distribute apps.
That's great.
I would go to those, yeah. Yes.
So the background processing on push, that's something you can sort of do today if you use a VoIP push and you have the VoIP capability, but I'm assuming this is enabling it for other push types.
Correct.
And if that's the case, I've got two questions. One is, do you need to be a Windows 8.1 app type? And two, today, if we want to go and do a fetch when we push, or do some sort of syncing with the web, and we're getting shut down and then the push agent is being disabled, are the restrictions more lenient in 8.1?
Okay, so there's two questions. Do you have to be a Windows Phone 8.1 app to use the push-to-wake task? And the answer is yes. And then the second question, I think, if I was trying to repeat it back, is well, what if I can't get everything done in the time frame on the memory? What do I do then? And what we want to ensure that push-to-wake an agent is really cool, it's really powerful, but it could also take down the phone. Is people start using it, and we didn't impose any limits on those tasks. So there are limits in terms of how much CPU and how much memory you can use on that. And Sean Henry will go over that. Is it 5:30 today, Thomas? Yeah, 5:30 today, in intricate, extreme detail. So yeah.
Yeah. What updates have you done with theming? If an app is in memory and the user goes into settings, changes the theming, it doesn't seem to apply to
that is a good question. One of the mantras for the app model team is we don't do pixels. So unfortunately, I don't know. That's a good question for the XAML. There is a XAML team presentation, I believe, right after this. Unfortunately, I don't know.
Regarding streaming experience, do Windows Phone 8.1 has the protected media pass?
I can stop you right now. Don't ask me. It could very well do. There is a media session which I believe is on tomorrow morning, and they will know that. Unfortunately, I'm a user, not a developer on the streaming side. So. Yeah, this guy.
Are the notifications between phone and desktop, do those sync? So if I sent you a tweet earlier, if you read that on your Surface, does that then automatically disappear from Action Center on the phone?
Currently, they do not. So the question was, do the notifications sync between device and PC? And they don't currently. It's a great idea, something we want to.
And then secondly, is there a way to do device to cloud sync through the push notification stuff so that if I have something on my device, if I have a persistent connection back to my server, can I have that go through WNS? Or do I have to just go straight through my API?
Go through your API, I believe. But again, I would ask Thomas at his session today.
Cool, thanks.
Is it possible to extract the Apex content which is installed on the SD card using make apex/unpack command?
Is it possible to what? To
extract the application, like our Apex content, which is installed on a SD card, using the make apex command?
Well, so the application that's installed on the SD card, there is no Apex on the SD card. It is the installation folder for your Apex, and that's encrypted on the SD card.
So nobody will be able to
Right.
extract it.
Right.
Okay, fine.
Okay, if there's no more questions, thanks for coming, and enjoy the rest of the build.